So we are getting ready to do one of my favorite things to do. I enjoy it. Hope you enjoy it. Paulie, do you enjoy it?
Sometimes.
All right. Unbookings.
Unbooking.
Done several of these. We've gotten positive feedback. People seem to enjoy them. All two of them. For today's unbooking, we're going to be doing a book by Richard Koch. Koch. I'm going to struggle saying that this entire video. And I might accidentally call him Francis for some reason because that's what I was doing earlier. So Richard Koch wrote today's book. He's an author, an investor, and an entrepreneur. He actually has a lot of businesses in like a lot of different genres, whatever the word is. It's like restaurants and all sorts of things that he does, and he's very successful at them. He describes himself, Paulie, as a lazy entrepreneur. It's interesting because he's written a ton of books, got a ton of businesses, but he calls himself a lazy entrepreneur. What do you think that means?
He is someone who does a lot, but also enjoys to sleep.
I don't know how you can write so many books, have so many businesses, be an author, an investor, a speaker, then call yourself a lazy entrepreneur. He just must know something about himself that we don't know. Whatever it is, he calls himself a lazy entrepreneur. Find it hard to believe. So Richard, I almost said Francis, Richard Koch wrote today's book. And I read this book because I kept hearing about this principle called the 80-20 principle. So today's book, today's unbooking is the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch. Have you ever read this, Paulie?
No, but I'm very aware of the principle.
Kenny?
Nope.
Are you aware of the principle?
I've heard it, but I do not remember what it means.
Okay, so good. So the more and more I got into podcasts and books about business and things like that, self-improvement, I kept hearing the 80-20 principle, the 80-20 principle. And it kept coming up.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a book.
Well, I didn't either. And then I think one time somebody referenced this book. And I was like, I keep hearing that and I understand the basic principle behind it based off what I'm hearing. But I was like, I really want to dig into it. Because for me, the understanding that I had was basically that 20% of your input or effort basically leads to 80% of your output or outcome. And me, being a contrarian, always kind of fought back against that. I was like, wait, why 80-20? Why? Well, couldn't it be 30-70? And I thought, giving some leeway to whoever came up with the principle, that there was probably an element of that it didn't have to be exactly 20-80. But anyways, I wanted to clear it up for myself. So I ordered the book and really kind of dug into this idea, how Koch kind of lays it out. And I liked the book. And I also had a greater appreciation now for when people say 80-20. Now, there's two parts to this. I think sometimes people say 80-20 principle on that more shallow understanding of it, how they've heard it conversationally. But I also now, when somebody mentions it, I think I have a better understanding of what Koch actually meant and how he would actually think more so when people say it or when he would use the term.
Does he go into why 80-20?
Yeah, he does. And it's based off of experience and I guess research technically, where that kind of seems to be the golden ratio, if you want to call it. He does say in the book, could you find instances where it's more 50-50? Where 50% of your effort leads to 50% of your outcome or whatever. And he's like, sure, but what you're going to find is that it's closer to 80-20. And they talk about how in business, it seems like 20% of customers usually equal 80% of a business's sales or revenue, based off his research and insight, that it was like 80-20 seemed to be the way to describe it.
Does he talk about why that ratio has to equal 100?
I don't think it does. That's how I was phrasing it just now, but I don't think it does. And I'm pretty sure that I remember that from the book, that he was basically saying it doesn't have to equal 100. It's just an easy way to think about it, remember it. And the way he phrases it right at the beginning of the book, and I'll make sure I get it right here. He says, in any population, some things are likely to be much more important than others. That's like, to me, is the bare bones explanation of what the 80-20 principle is. That in any population, some things are likely to be much more important than others. And he basically has you dial in on that 20% as the thing that is more important, which means 80% of what you do technically is less important. And that's another thing. The 20 and the 80 are not equaling 100 because that's the same thing. The 20 and the 80 are two different things. The 20% is the input. The 80% is the output of the 20% of input. They're two separate numbers that he's mashing together, not to create a ratio necessarily, but you just need to read the book. Hopefully that's clear as mud. 20% of your effort usually turns into 80% of your outcome. Man, I am making this confusing.
I made sense to me.
I made sense to me. Now we're all confused. So we'll just move on then. A couple other things that he says, I'll just read the quotes from the book. Along with, in any population, some things are likely to be much more important than others. He says, a minority of causes, inputs, or effort usually lead to a majority of the results, outputs, or rewards. So that's the 80-20 principle in a nutshell. So he goes into a lot of cool things in this book. And one thing he talks about is how do you increase your output? Like if you want more sales, in general, you want more of your effort to be rewarded. He says that there's two ways basically to increase that output or increase the reward, whatever that may be. Number one, he says if you want to increase your output, you can reallocate resources from unproductive to productive uses. So that's saying, okay, I'm not going to put my resources in this area anymore because I'm just not getting anything from it. The second way you can increase output is to find ways to make your unproductive resources more effective. So instead of saying, oh, okay, I'm not messing with that anymore, he's saying, how can I, if I'm going to stick to this system or whatever, how can I make that system more efficient so that I can get more out of it? Yeah. So that's a really good way to look at, if you have a product that you're not selling enough of, he's saying your two options are basically to say, okay, I'm not even going to worry about that product. I'm going to worry about the one that's selling, which is really what he pushes in the book. Or another way to increase the effectiveness or the efficiency of that product, if you're not going to just go another direction, is to look at it and say, how can I improve that product? So yeah, Koch is basically, the question he poses in the book is, what is the 20% that is leading to the 80%? So look at the effort you're putting in. And 20% of the effort that you're putting in is leading to 80% of the outcome that you're getting. And he's saying, find that thing and focus on that thing. Find those customers and focus on those customers. And that's kind of the point. And he says right here on the back of the book, get more done by doing less. And it's so funny because it sounds so like clickbait. You know what I'm saying? Like it sounds so like lose 10 pounds in 10 days, type thing. But there really is like, it's not a get rich quick scheme.
I think it's more so focus more on the less, but not on less.
I think if he was sitting here, he would also say, no, it's also do less. And maybe that's where the lazy entrepreneur comes in, as he's like trying to figure out what's the least that I can do, but still be more effective. So I think you're right. I think there's some marketing in there, but I also think it's a genuine, unless his comment, lazy entrepreneur, is also part of the marketing, which it very well could be.
Yeah.
That's like 5D chess there, Another note that I had here is he said he wants to generate the most with the least effort. That's kind of the theme of the book. I think it's also important to point out that he says multiple times that if you're really going to follow the 80-20 mindset, that you're going to have to think unconventionally. You're not going to be able to do things like other people do it, whether it be the systems or the schedule, the format, whatever. You're going to have to think differently from other people if you're going to achieve this. And people might look at you a little bit crazy. Like if you say, hey, we're going to get together and shoot 16 videos in one day. It's a little wild. Mm-hmm. But what's the least amount of effort? Seems like a lot of effort, but it's just one day and not 2 weeks. So it's a little unconventional. Yeah. What do you think, Kenny?
Yep.
He's back there on his phone. I'm like, so we're going to get the favorite quote here in a second. But before we do, there's just a couple things I thought. Like, I need to open up the book because it is an unbooking. I wanted to go through these. I thought this was good. So on page 163 of this version, he goes through the top 10 low value uses of time. So I'm going to go through all 10 of these. And then he has, of course, the highest value uses of time. Number 1, things other people want you to do. Number 2, things that have always been done this way. Number 3, things you're not unusually good at doing. Number 4, things you don't enjoy doing. Number 5, things that are always interrupted. Number 6, things few people are interested in, like the miserable company. Number 7, things that have already taken twice as long as you originally expected. Number 8, things where your collaborators are unreliable or low quality. Sorry. I just knew there was going to be a joke after I said
immediately I feel like you're judging us.
He read that and looked right
I
at
can't-
us.
My collaborators are reliable and very high quality. They're not here right now, though. I don't know where. Number 9, low value use of time. Things that have a predictable cycle. Ooh, that's interesting. What does that mean? Maybe something that you know is like not...
Sustainable?
Yes, maybe that's what he means there. Things that have a predictable cycle. Maybe if you start something over and over again, but you've never been able to sustain it. So it's like, okay, I'm going to go on this diet. And it's just, you're not going to not eat whatever it is for the rest of your life. And it's a constant thing that you're, I don't want to say failing, but like, could that be it? I don't know. What do you think? Number 10 is my favorite. This is like a part of the book too, like Koch's personality shows through every once in a while. A low value use of time. Number 10, answering the phone. I love it. I hate answering the phone. I hate phones. Just text me or just let me not have a phone. Okay, so that was the 10. Put them right here on the screen. Top 10 highest value uses of time. Number 1, things that advance your overall purpose in life. 2, things you have always wanted to do. Number 3, things already in the 20/80 relationship of time to result. Number 4, innovative ways of doing things that promise to slash the time required and or multiply the quality of results. Shut up, I'm doing this. Number 5, things other people tell you can't be done. Oh, that's interesting. I guess I was waiting for an interesting one. Things other people tell you can't be done. He says that's a high value use of time. And you know what? That makes sense because a lot of times when people look at you and they're like, I don't know, that's probably not worth doing, Elon Musk. You can't make an electric vehicle that's scalable and to produce for the masses. You can't go to the moon, NASA, as if that's what was happening. There's people out there, hey, come on, NASA.
Like NASA's a guy.
Number 6, things other people have done successfully in a different arena. So if you can look at somebody else like as a model and say, hey, they did that in their field, I can do the same thing. Number 7, things that use your own creativity. 8, things that you can get other people to do for you with relatively little effort on your part. Number 9, anything with high quality collaborators who have already transcended the 80-20 rule of time, who use time eccentrically and effectively. So he's just talking about like multiplying effort on time. He talks about that too, that the 80-20 principle isn't just adding things. It's a principle of multiplication. That if you really follow it, that it scales massively. Number 10, things for which it is now or never. You got to take advantage of opportunities. Page 174, I wanted to get to this too. Oh, this was almost my favorite quote. It's an honorable mention, so this is why I wanted to read it. So check this out. He's talking about how money is overrated. Remember that the more money you have, the less value an extra dollop of wealth creates. In economist speak, the marginal utility of money declines sharply. Once you have adjusted to a higher standard of living, it may give you little or no extra happiness. It can even turn negative if the extra cost of maintaining the new lifestyle causes anxiety or piles on extra pressure to earn money in non-satisfying ways.
So true.
And he's basically saying you earn more money, so then money means less to you. But then if you adjust to that higher standard of living, or if you scale to another lifestyle, then you put more pressure to earn more money so that you can sustain it, which leads you to do things you don't want to do in order to earn the money and causes more stress. It's kind of like that principle from The Richest Man in Babylon, where he says, the idea of what we need always changes with how much money we make unless we protest to the contrary. We're constantly needing and wanting more as we get more, unless we fight that urge. I'm glad I found that and pulled that out of there. Last one before favorite quote. Oh, yeah, this was another one that was like, I wanted it to be favorite quote, but I couldn't do it. He says, there's 2 ways to be happier. Number 1, identify the times when you are happiest and expand them as much as possible. Number 2, identify the times when you are least happy and reduce them as much as possible. The end. I love when people take things like Spencer Johnson that are so complex and seem so difficult. And like, no, it's actually extremely simple. And here he is, he's like, okay, you want to be happy? Here's what you do. Figure out the things that make you happy and expand on them. Figure out the things that make you least happy and reduce them. And it's like, yeah, it really makes me want to stop, even right now, just stop and make a list. Like, okay, things that make me happy, things that don't make me happy, and just actually write them down and then go, okay. Because a lot of times we do these things. We just get caught in a cycle of doing things or accepting things because we simply don't stop and identify them. All right, favorite quote. Page 182 right here. Oh, I like this. This one, I put a star next to it because as we were formulating The Miserable Company, this one like hit home. So he says, history is determined and changed by dedicated individuals who form effective alliances with a small number of close collaborators. And I thought that was dope. And there's so many examples of that. If you look at like the biggest companies now. And he expands on that too to talk about like people don't do things on their own. Anybody who's familiar with the story of Apple, you know, Steve Jobs gets a lot of credit, and he should, for what Apple was. And he's such a visionary and everything. But there were multiple people that were doing multiple things that he could not do. There are a lot of people that deserve a lot of credit along with him. But a lot of times we do get caught up in that individual. That's anything. You talk about sports, they're like, who's the greatest of all time? You know, who's the one, you know, we want to define and label. So very good point on that favorite quote there. Time for the worst segment of this video. Random highlight. Just trying to find a random highlight when we read it. Oh, found one. Risk minimization is overrated. If you want to become rich enough to change your future lifestyle, you need to attain above average returns. Basically saying you could throw all your money in 401k, you could throw all your money in a mutual fund, but if you want to become rich enough to change your future lifestyle, you need to attain above average returns. Risk minimization is overrated. So I guess he's been saying like people just who are like every move is like a skittish move. You know, let's do this. Okay, let's do this. He's saying, oh, that's fine. I mean, you can do that, but if you want to move beyond above average, you're going to have to get above average returns, which probably means you're going to have to take some risk. Which is interesting because I just saw a conversation with Gary Vee and some other entrepreneur who were talking about entrepreneurs never really feel like they're taking risk. If they do something, it's because they believe in it. There may be risk elements in it, but they're just going for it. So and that's kind of how I view risk now. It's like, I don't view it as like, oh, I'm taking a risk. It's like, hey, there could be a possible return. Let me balance it. Let me weigh it out. Got a good gut feeling, feel like it's smart, like I'm making a wise decision. Boom, go for it.
The higher the risk, the higher the possible return.
And I actually read a book, I think it's called Risk Reward. We'll unbook that sometime. Read it or beat it. The idea behind read it or beat it is you have a limited amount of time on earth. There's a lot of books out there. Do you have to read this book before you die? In my opinion, no. I think you could watch this video and save yourself the hours it would take to read the book. Now, that being said, I say this sincerely, there's a lot of good stuff in this book. I also feel like it's one of those books, you ever read a book where it's like, you felt like you could just read the first sentence in every paragraph and that's all you needed? It's almost like the book was a outline and then they just put points like, I put a couple sentences there, put a couple sentences. So that's kind of how this book was to me. That being said, I completely agree with pretty much everything he says in this book. I just don't think that you have to read the book to get the full value of the book. 80-20 principle, legit. This book, I just don't think you have to read it. If you've read any of these books, let us know about it. Seriously, if I messed up the explanation, if you could have done this better than me, then go ahead and do it in the comments. Subscribe, click the little bell thingy. Let's have a good time. Really want to hear from you. And what books do you want to see unbooked? Let me know. Hit us up. Miserable Mug.